episode of Navigating Life After 40. I am your host, Roni. And in today's episode, I am so excited to chat with Lauren Chiren, who is a leading menopause advocate and expert in executive women's well-being. Lauren has made significant contributions to understanding and supporting menopause through her work with the UK Parliament, USA DE&I Committee, and other influential bodies. Her journey from a senior role in financial services to becoming a champion for menopause awareness is truly inspiring. In this episode, we'll talk more about Lauren's personal story, explore the challenges women face during menopause at work, and discuss practical strategies for managing your symptoms. We'll also talk about the importance of creating supportive environments at work and how women can advocate for their needs during this time. Let's dive in. Welcome to Navigating Life After 40, the podcast that's all about helping women navigate this exciting and sometimes challenging phase of life. I'm your host, Roni Jai, and I'll be here sharing some of my own personal experiences, chatting with experts and a few friends, and also providing some practical advice and support to help you live your best life after 40. Let's get started. I am here today with guest Lauren Chiren, and we're going to spend some time today talking about Lauren's journey with menopause, also the work that she's been doing, as well as just answering some of the questions that you all have sent in about menopause and how to navigate that in the workplace. This will be a 3-part series, with this being part 1 of that 3-part series. And we'll be just talking about this in terms of navigating it in the workplace, along with Lauren's wonderful contributions. How are you doing today, Lauren?
Amazing. Yeah, no, really good. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to chat with you today.
Thank you for being here. All right, we'll start by learning a lot more about you and your journey. So, can you share with us your journey into menopause and how this experience led you from a senior role in financial services to becoming a dedicated menopause advocate? I did read that about your background, and so I was very impressed. So, I would love to learn more about that from you.
Yeah, I was clueless. I was utterly clueless. I had a very tricky pregnancy. My partner left. I was offered termination at 6 months, and I literally was left carrying the baby as a bump. I was a senior exec in financial services, and I just kind of put one foot in front of each other, had my son, and carried on working. I employed a nanny to help me so that I could go to work. And just noticed that over a couple of years that I was struggling to speak up in meetings. I was finding my throat was so tight with anxiety that I couldn't squeak out the simplest of words. Or I'd look at one of my colleagues who had headhunted and I couldn't remember her name, although I could tell you her children's names and her husband's name. And she'd worked for me for 8 years. Or I would just be finding myself flying off the handle, or feeling like on the verge of flying off the handle and trying really hard to control my temper, or being really emotional and needing to reach for the tissues. Like, I kept a makeup bag. Like, I haven't got any makeup on, so my apologies. But, I kept a makeup bag in the ladies' disabled toilet so that I could go there, get my breath back, regain my composure, put my makeup back on and go back to work. And eventually I got to the point where I thought I had early onset dementia. So I was in my early 40s. I didn't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable at work. So I left. And then I found out that I had gone through menopause at 37 immediately after I'd had my son. And I was utterly clueless. So that was when I went, menopause, is that all it was? I was the happiest menopausal woman in the UK. So that was the beginning of everything that I've been doing for the last 10 years.
As you were talking, it made me think about myself, because I actually was in that position maybe about 3.5 years ago. And I was the same way. I was at work and I had just moved into this new role, and I would be in these meetings and I'm like, what is happening to me? I don't feel like I can speak up. I was forgetting things, or if I was in the middle of saying something, the brain fog just kicked in and I couldn't remember the rest of the sentence I was going to say. It was even difficult formulating a sentence. And like you, I also had that same thing where I was just irritable all the time and just flying off the handle. And I think I owe some people an apology after this. I had, I had no idea what was happening. And one of the things that you mentioned was 37. And I think a lot of women and even doctors. There are still some doctors who are not on board with thinking that women can start menopause at an early age. Thankfully, there are more doctors speaking out about it now, but there still are tons who do not know that, hey, it doesn't start in 45 or 41. In your case, it was 37.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that it makes me kind of sad because I really wish that there was more research and more work put into really understanding women overall and not grouping us all into this box. Like it has to be at this age. It can be earlier for some people. And still focusing on your journey. So you went through this transformative stage in your life that led you to start menopause at an early age. Were there any other hurdles that you encountered? And if so, how did they fuel your mission to begin advocating for women who are going through menopause?
I think the key thing really for me was the fact that although I was a senior exec in financial services, I actually have quite a portfolio career and my background is rich in human performance. So I have a degree in psychology. I have a background in very senior sports and judo and athletics. And I have studied anatomy and physiology. I'm a sports therapist, personal trainer, nutritional advisor, I've got diplomas in anatomy and physiology and all sorts of things to do with human performance, mental health. So if someone with that depth of training and experience doesn't know what menopause is, then how on earth are we supposed to know what it is, when it's going to happen, how we support ourselves? So I think it was the moment when I went back to my doctor after having blood tests, expecting to be told how severe my early onset dementia was. And he turns around to go, to be sure, Lauren, you've just been through the menopause. I was like, oh, wow. Wow, really? And I was so, I can't even begin to express the relief. Again, I burst into tears because I was still in that highly volatile emotional state and my cortisol levels were through the roof and I hadn't slept for 18 months. But in that moment, I was like, okay, right, I can't be the only person. I just can't be the only person. And I reached out to my local community. I collaborated with a charity to arrange to make menopause socials happen. And we brought together lots of women to talk about their experiences. And that was the moment when I realized that maybe I would work again. Maybe I hadn't lost the plot. Maybe there was some value that I could bring with my experience. And I got invited into, there's a company half a mile from where I live called Airbus, and they're an international organization. And one of their members of staff said to me, would you come and talk to our organization about this? So I ended up not actually working with them straight off, but they offered me their auditorium and I invited 60 companies from around the UK and further afield to come for a conference. And that was the beginning of me sharing my story and bringing lawyers together to talk about the implications for the workplace, using my personal training and sports therapy and nutritional background and bringing other experts in the field to talk about their journey. And from that moment on, and it was never intended to be a business, it was just kind of like desperately, desperately don't want someone else to go through what I've gone through. This is just outstandingly wrong on so many levels because we're all going to go through it and we should know about it. Why are we not brought up understanding this thing? But from that day on, I then got invites to go and speak to other people in other companies. And that was when I was kind of like, okay, I better start researching this stuff a lot more deeply, learning about it, doing more qualifications. And I started retraining and meeting experts from around the world to find out what we can do about it. And I'm still learning. And there's so much, like you said, we've got a long way to go because culturally, depending on our lifestyles, our experiences of menopause are so unique and no two people have the same experience. And, we go through menopause at different times depending on where we're from and what our lifestyles are like. So there's so much that we've still got to learn. And I'm just fascinated that women's health has been so poorly researched and understood. And unless you're upper socioeconomic Caucasian, you haven't even been touched on when it comes to women's health. And we've not even been that well studied. So we need to band together and support each other and get more work done in that space because, yeah, we don't even know what a paracetamol can do to us because it's not been properly researched on a woman's body. So we've got a long way to go.
And I agree with you that there needs to be more work done. But it also seems like, although you went through this time where It's like, I don't know what was going on with me, but when I found out, it was such a relief that it led you into this field or this work now of now I'm going to be advocating for other women and advocating for these changes to be made so that no one else has to go through this experience. And they also know that they're not alone. There is help and there's education out here. And also there's somebody fighting for you, which I loved when I was reading your background, which leads me into your professional contributions. I feel like they are very remarkable and you're doing some great work. Could you elaborate just a little bit more on your involvement with the UK Parliament, the DE&I committee, and the BSI and ISO,
Mm,
and menopause and menstrual
sure.
health? What are some things that you've been working on with them to help implement in the UK?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you saying that back because I've never thought of myself as doing anything other than just desperately wanting to stop anyone else going through what I went through because I got to some really dark places and, you know, it's just wrong and on so many levels. So one of the things that I initially did was write to my member of parliament and just say, look, I've had this experience. Nobody's talking about it. There isn't the right help and support. Now, I did get great help and support from my doctor. He was very quick to figure out what was going on. That's unusual. And I found that out really quickly by communicating with other people. So I was really, really lucky. I had a young doctor. He was very up to date with all the latest things. But even then, the hormone replacement therapy that he put me on at the time didn't agree with me. I went back and said, after a month, I don't like this. It's making me feel really ill. And he said, that's fine. You're healthy and you're well. You're doing impact exercises. You're eating really well. I'm a former personal trainer. And he didn't kind of pursue it and look at alternatives based on the fact that I really should have been on HRT for a lot longer. So yes, I was lucky and now I know a lot more. Perhaps I need to revisit that. And there's new research coming out that shows that perhaps you can start it later. So over the course of time, the more I was lobbying government and reaching out to people via LinkedIn right around the world. So in Australia, speaking out in the media through there, I had a connection with someone in the DE&I committee in the US and we had an amazing conversation. He was like, no one's talking about this. You know, tell me more. What have you been doing? And he was really fascinated. And we had some really great conversations. And the UK Parliament over the next few years were quite interested in little snippets now and then of conversation. And we had a PM, Prime Minister Theresa May, and she kind of actually was the first PM to stand up. First member of Parliament stood up and said the word menopause in Parliament a number of years ago. And then more recently, we had a cross-party committee that did a survey and they came up with some phenomenal results from that survey about what people experience, what would be a really great way to move forward for the country. And unfortunately, at the time, the majority of the recommendations were turned down. Now that we've had a change in government, at the time of recording this, we have a very recent change of government, and the new government has committed that any employers over 250 people in their business will have to have a menopause action plan and menopause guidance.
Nice.
Yes.
That is wonderful.
So 10 years after banging the drum, we are hopefully going to see change, which is exciting. And I see a big shift and change in my US clients as well. So I've just back from New Jersey and New York and Philadelphia. And I can see a big shift in the conversations I'm having with my large corporate organizations over there. And the types of activities they want to do for their people now are very benefits focused, very educational, very awareness raising as well. So I am back and forth quite a lot doing talks and doing training and running sessions for people going through menopause in the workplace or by their employer, which is super exciting because if I've got some of the biggest companies in New York taking this on board, that's an amazing sign. I'm going to Washington shortly to do the same over there. So I know this is growing and evolving. And I know that employers are really beginning to understand that if they want to have lots of senior women confidently and competently performing, they're going to have to shift their culture. They're going to have to shift their work environment so that it is conducive to someone going through any woman's life stage, including menopause. So yeah, lots of steps forward.
I love the work that you're doing. Even over here in the US, we definitely need it here. And I know that you mentioned that you don't quite think that you're doing a lot, but I feel like what you're doing is really wonderful. And I know sometimes it's hard for us to just accept all of the accolades, but these are the things that you're doing. And I know it was a tough time. for you. But I do feel like you were chosen for a reason to do this work. And so I usually say this at the end of the episode, and I'm going to say it now. Thank you for the advocacy that you're doing. Thank you for not only doing it where you are, okay, but now you're bringing it over here to the US because there's so many people who do not know, they do not understand. When I talk to you in a pre-interview, I talked to you about my day job and how we've had this conversation recently. And I'm like, was amazing to hear the number of women in the room with a similar story and the concerns with really not having the support from doctors. I'm not sure if this happens a lot in the UK, but I know over here in the US, one of the first things that they rush to do is put you on an antidepressant. I know that was one of the things my doctor rushed to put me on. And I was just like, I don't want that. Like, no. And she was like, well, give it a try. I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's negotiate. I'll get it. I'm going to put it on the counter and I'm going to just let it sit there. But what are some other alternatives? Because I cannot see myself taking this because this isn't the issue. But she did not want to put me on HRT. She didn't want to do it. I am now seeing a couple of doctors over here in the US who really are pushing for HRT and they are advocating more for menopause. But I want to just really say I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you so much. And we know that you are talking to employers, and that is really one of the crucial parts of your mission. So, why do you feel that it is important for workplaces to be supportive of menopause, and what business benefits can they expect from supporting women navigating this phase?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. So, I did a talk recently with the HSBC. So, a global organization employ a lot of people and very progressive in terms of supporting their women through the organization, but still have a gap. And whether I'm working with Nike or Amazon or any of the other big brands around the world, we know that we've got a huge amount of women coming into entry level positions, especially in STEM subjects. They'll come into entry level post university or post studies. They'll do really well in those junior positions. They'll get into middle management positions and then they drop off a cliff. Now, we know people are dropping off because they're having babies. We know they're dropping off because they've got other methods of support through partners and different reasons why they're dropping out of the workplace. They might have caring responsibilities. They might have parents that need them to be there. There's lots of reasons why people drop out of the workplace. But we then have all these people who are all these women in entry and junior and middle level management positions. And then we've got gap and we've got a sprinkling of women in senior level positions. So we've got this chasm. And we know that if you take the upper middle levels of management and you've got women and you've got men and we assess their performance, women outperform men at that stage. And yet it's the men that get promoted. And that is something we need to address and we need to shine the light on. So when you look into that more deeply, you start to recognize that our biology means that we have different challenges. The workplace from a built environment point of view is not set up for success. If you use a menstrual cup and you've got gender neutral toilets, do you really want to go into a toilet, do your business and then come out and then wash your menstrual cup in front of a public group of people? If you have a flood or you've got a leak, do you really want to have to do something public demonstrates what you're going through? No, of course not. So we have to get employers to start to think about refurbishing and rebuilding their structured environments. We need to think about the entire colleague journey from job design, person spec, all the way through. And this is when I start going off on a tangent. I have to ask you to remind me of the question. Sorry. Yes. Ask me the question again, because I end up getting really passionate about, why do we need to talk about menopause at work?
Yeah. And the benefits that they can expect from adopting these.
Yeah. So if you've got somebody who is trying to have a family, has got fertility issues or miscarriages, and then they become perimenopausal, and you're not talking about the subject, they're having to layer upon layer upon layer their energy to wear this corporate mask. And they have to spend so much time, effort, and energy just to turn up that you'll notice that these women are looking beautiful. Their hair is perfect. Their makeup's perfect. Their nails are done. Their clothes are perfect because they're trying to wear this external mask. I'm not saying that anyone should or shouldn't do any of this. I have noticed that. And I see people quite often when I'm at conferences, they'll come up to me and they're beautifully turned out. I'm like, yes, I'm spending so much time on my external appearance because I don't want anyone to see that I'm crumbling inside. So we need to make it okay, not for people to crumble inside, but for people to not feel like they have to mask that they're having a hot flash, to have an hour off to go and see their doctor and have a powerful conversation with their doctor to get HRT or to get the right medication or the right treatment pathway for them, because they've been empowered through their workplace with education, with benefits, so that they can stay in work. At the moment in the UK, for example, we lose somewhere in the region of 10 million work days a year because people are supported through menopause, over 10 to 12 billion pounds a year. We've only got 67 million people in this country. You've got what, 400 million? 400?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. So if you extrapolate those numbers up, you've got, many more times than that. So if an employer loses somebody, which we know that 1 in 4 people will consider leaving, will leave, will take a sideways step, or will go part-time. So if we've got people going that way instead of going that way, then it's costing an organization money. So if someone leaves, it costs between 112 and 220% of their salary to replace them. And that doesn't include the lost skills, knowledge, and experience walking out the door. It doesn't include the stress that's put on their colleagues that have to carry the can until they are replaced and someone else can pick up that workload. So from a cost benefit analysis, from a bottom line impact, we're going to have more women in the workplace. We're going to have more equity in the workplace. We're going to be more inclusive. We're going to have better diversity. We're going to have better decision making. We're going to have better continuity. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's a win, win, win. It's a win for the individual. It's a win for the business. It's a win for the bottom line. So, I have got business cases coming out of my ears for different industries about why this is so powerful. But really, companies invest a lot of money to bring people on board. And if they stay, they invest a lot of money in training them. And they don't want people to leave. But what happens is managers aren't skilled and trained to notice when somebody is perhaps not performing at whatever that individual's normal is. And managers aren't skilled to know how to step in and help that individual and help understand the issue, identify the problem, and create create some sort of pathway forward. What happens is the manager notices someone's not performing and they allow them to gradually not perform, and then it becomes a performance issue. Then the manager has spent time managing it. The individual is now completely disenfranchised. They don't believe the performance plan is a way to bring them back on board. They think the performance plan is a way to push them out. So it's a lose-lose. And very few companies use performance plans proactively and well, positively. So we need to turn that around. And we can do that by making menopause just a normal conversation, something that we've got great resources for, something that we honor the wisdom, the power, the skills, the experience, and the knowledge these incredible women that we're working with bring to the table, instead of thinking that they're becoming invisible or, a hot flush means that they're not competent. I mean, let's get real. Seriously, these are the most incredibly powerful, skilled, knowledgeable, and experienced people we've got in the business. They've not only managed their job, they've probably managed a whole lot of other stuff outside of the workplace without skipping a beat. And that has to start being celebrated instead of the opposite. So anyway, sorry, I do get on my high horse about this because I'm so passionate about it.
I am so engaged. No, I love it because it sounds like for employers to incorporate this level of support for women in the workplace, it's a win-win. You're keeping employees, which means you're keeping money in house. You're not losing money, like you said. And a lot of people don't know that. As someone who works in management myself, I know that whenever you lose someone, that's a lot of money. And a lot of people don't recognize that. And usually, a lot of times, as you mentioned, it's not having the right supports in place, especially when I hear women share their reasons for maybe resigning. And like you mentioned, stepping down part time, it's always usually a resource reason. So you hit the nail on the head with that one. So thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that and your education behind it because I was really tuned in. I feel like I'm in a class. I love it. So I have a few individuals that tune in often to the show and they were aware that this episode was coming up. And so I did ask, hey, do you have any questions that you would like for me to incorporate into this episode? And all of these women are trying to work and navigate perimenopause and menopause at the same time. And so we know that that can be a challenge at work. I myself know that it all too well. Is it so? One of the first questions that came through was, should women disclose that they are going through menopause at work? And if so, how can they approach this conversation with their employers or their colleagues?
It's really personal, isn't it? There isn't any one size fits all to that. And I think you have to think about there is two sides to this. So first of all, there's an employer's responsibility to have a duty of care for their people and to provide the right circumstances, the right culture, the right support for their people to be able to thrive and work. There's then the individual's responsibility to take care of themselves and to look after themselves and to avail of the support and the resources that are made available to them. Now, that was something I did not do because I was terrified that occupational health would tell on me or inform my boss of what I was going through, that I wasn't capable. I did not want to be seen to be using the private medical because what if they gave a report back to my company? You know what? The reality is, it took my doctor to say to me, the reason these large companies or small companies or any company has these things in place is to help you so that they can get you back to work sooner than if you tried to do it on your own, right? But back then, I saw that it was a sign of weakness to ask for help and support. Now I know it's a sign of strength to ask for help and support. If we saw somebody else suffering, we would want to help them straight away. We wouldn't leave them suffering. We would get all the help and support they needed ASAP. So we need to start doing that for ourselves. So we need to step up and start learning about menopause. We need to start understanding what help and support is available and how we can employ that support. But at the moment, there's a chasm because we can do as much reading and learning as we want, but we might not get the help and support from our doctors because our doctors might not be educated. And then our employers might not understand what it is that they can do. So we need to use everyone that's got a voice to help the employer to start to raise awareness, understand what support people need, and make sure that we create that overall culture and environment so that people feel that they can open up. Basically, we just need to make our workplaces fit for purpose for women, basically. Whether they've got periods, endometriosis, PMDD, fibroids, pregnancies, miscarriages, you name it, all the things that make us women. So, and forgive me, because we have to be mindful for transgender and non-binary and gender questioning colleagues as well. So obviously we've all got different experiences, but if we are born and we have an ability to have a period and go through all of these biological processes, we need to change that patriarchal society so that we can actually thrive in that environment. So for me, it's about the conversation. It's about what do you need for you to continue to thrive in your job? Have a think about keeping a symptoms list. Go on to the North American Menopause Society or the Menopause Society as it is now. Download the resources that are available for there. Understand what the guidance is for the doctors in America. Learn what's available and what your doctor should be doing for you. And take your symptoms list, go to your doctor and have a conversation, go to your manager, have a conversation and just say, look, this is what I recognize is happening. These are the symptoms I'm experiencing. This is the support I'm putting in place for myself. Now, what I would like you to consider as an employer, as a manager, whatever, these are the things that would help me to stay on target with my performance. What can you do? Where can you meet me? How can we make this work so it's a win-win for both of us? So it's about empowering people to have these conversations on one side, and it's also about empowering employers to have these conversations as well, because we need to balance the playing field on both sides.
Yeah, so really being proactive in what you need,
Mm,
not only for yourself, but at work at the same time. Because when we are proactive and we're able to advocate for ourselves at work, it
mm.
also makes us feel empowered too. Do you think, and this may not be an employer's place, but with more employers now being on board with the work with menopause and what you're seeing in the work that you're doing, do you find that more employers are now incorporating this into their benefits? For example, maybe partnering with some organizations to offer menopause services to women?
Yeah, I think the reality is if someone knows they're menopausal or perimenopausal, they're much more likely to be able to have that constructive conversation, ask what resources are available, which makes it easier for the manager. It makes it a lot easier for the manager if the company has trained the manager on how to have these conversations as well. And the other thing that I think is quite prevalent, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, often people go to the doctor feeling like they're not quite right. They might not even know they're menopausal, but they're offered antidepressants or stress medication. And there's something in our gut that tells us that we're not depressed. We're not right, but we're not depressed, or we're not stressed. We just know, even though we're not doctors, we just kind of know we're not dealing with depression or anxiety, that we've got symptoms that are kind of like that, but that's just not what the issue is. We know, even if we don't know it's menopause. So we have this natural reluctance not to want to go down those routes. And for many of us, it's not the right route. So the other challenge we've got is that often someone will start having really bad migraines, and to the point where they're worried they've got a brain tumor. So they go to the hospital, they have brain scans, and, they come back and they're clear. And then a year later or 6 months later, their joints are really hurting them. They get out of bed, they feel like they've got arthritis overnight, and they feel like a really old person. And they go for MRI scans and other tests and bloods and ultrasounds, and they come back clear. And then a few months later, they go off because they've had these palpitations or anxiety attacks, or they feel like their heart is constricting, and they end up in the emergency room because they think they're having a heart attack, and they have an ECG and they have these other tests. So for 2 or 3 or 4 years, they have all these really, really massive traumatic tests. They also know they're just not quite right, but their doctor is turning around and saying, no, there's nothing wrong. Everything's coming back negative, and no one's joining the dots. So it's very hard sometimes for us to know that we're perimenopausal, and that's what our experience is if we've not been educated in it. And this is where workplaces have got such a big opportunity to eliminate that confusion, eliminate all that testing, which is unnecessary, if we could just get the right treatment pathways from the get-go. So I think there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done. And I think that we need to work together. We need to think about how we can get our employers to bring on board. But the benefit side of it, most organizations I've spoken to, certainly the larger organizations I work with, I had conversations yesterday at the time of recording. I spoke to 2 global organizations yesterday in the States and Canada and Bermuda and different places. And they're kind of like, yeah, we absolutely overhauling our benefits offer. And we're absolutely making sure. And I'm helping them to understand what in their package is genuinely covering menopause and what is kind of ticking a box, because the big difference between the two. And there's a lot of organizations that go, well, we provide therapy, or we provide cognitive behavioral therapy, and that covers menopause. And we're like, well, actually, have those therapists and the CBT experts had menopause training? And the answer is no. So there's still a way to go, even with companies that have got benefits that say menopause. We need to dig a bit deeper and just check that they actually are giving that help and support. We've also found benefits packages where there are consultations, or telehealth packages where there's consultations, but they can't prescribe. So again, it's kind of like taking someone along the pathway and then putting a brick wall up in front of them. So we need to be really mindful of what we're providing for our people and making sure that they're really robust and they really do what they say on the tin.
I love that you are having these conversations. And it made me think about, as an attorney, I was scrolling on social media and I ran across this attorney. He mentioned that a lot of women going through menopause do not know that they can take a leave of absence from work.
Menopause, perimenopause is protected in the workplace because it's an intersectional issue that implicates, obviously, issues of gender, sex, age, because most of the time menopause is starting, perimenopause, menopause is happening to women over 40. So you're protected under the age statutes. And it's also a disability issue because it's a sex-based impairment.
I really want more clarity on this. And he mentioned that I know over here in the US, we have the Family Medical Leave Act. And he mentioned that women can take FMLA if they are going through the symptoms of menopause,
Yeah.
and it's really impacting their ability to do their jobs well. And a lot of women don't know that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know if that is something that you're having more conversations about, or you're also educating employers about, that they can also educate their employees on. Like,
Yeah.
if you need this, this is part of what this benefit is for.
100%. And it's exactly the same in America as it is in the UK. So we don't have direct menopause cover or, particular regulations or legislation that covers menopause under the name of menopause, but we have these family leave or we have protected characteristics that mean that if you are struggling for a significant period of time with symptoms of X, and we're talking about menopause, that is covered. So, what you're talking about could be miscarriage, or it could be fertility treatments, or it could be menopause. So all of these things are covered. And it's just not very well spoken about or educated about in the workplace. And I think historically, the States haven't been brilliant when it comes to leave generally. Like, we have quite generous, comparatively, we have quite generous annual leave. We might have 6 weeks leave, plus public holidays, plus compassionate leave, plus. Whereas in the States, historically, it's been like 2 weeks of personal time, or, it's a very different philosophy when it comes to time off of work. And I think the States have been less, I love to praise things in a positive way, and I'm trying to find the best way to say this, but they've been less progressive in terms of thinking about the benefits of affording somebody an additional day or two here and there to gain that performance from their people.
I think that is definitely something that's needed a lot more here, because it's like you mentioned, it's 2 weeks, or you have this very limited amount of time. From my experience being over here in the state, in every job I've ever had, I have never heard that mentioned. I've never heard it broken down. It's, you have this, and it's usually if you need to go on maternity leave, or if a woman has a miscarriage, which was one that was new to me at the company I'm working at now, you can take this leave. However, when we look at this, and I was so baffled when I heard that attorney, I said, why are we not talking about this? Because a lot of women don't know. And I'm sure if they knew that this resource was there, they would use it if they needed it. At least it would help them to understand, you know what? I've done these things. I may have advocated for myself with my boss, but I'm still not getting the support that I need from my doctor. This is really debilitating at this point where maybe I need to take a break and go on this journey to find someone who can really help me so that I can be okay when I return back to work.
Mhm.
I really wish, and this is something that now I'm just on this train, like I want more employers to talk about this.
Mhm.
We talk about every other benefit in the world, but when it comes down to women outside of pregnancy, we do not touch on anything else. And that's just not fair. It's not fair to women. It's almost like I feel in a way we're not really taking into account when they're making these decisions.
We're 51% of the population.
Yeah.
We're 51% of the population. And when you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, normally we're talking about minorities, and women are forgotten about. So we're not a minority, we're the majority.
Yeah.
So we're forgotten about when it comes to DE and I. And because we have just always put up, shut up and got on with it, we're forgotten about. And because we always just do, and even though, in the Western world, we know that people now believe that we should split household chores and caring responsibilities 50-50. That's what surveys show. But the reality is that women are still doing 85% of the caring responsibilities. They're still doing 85% of the childcare. They're still doing 85% of all of the home stuff that needs to be done. So attitudes look like they're changing on paper, but the reality is very different. And that means that we're carrying all that responsibility, plus we're performing out of our skins at work. So can you imagine if we were in a workplace where we could just take off that corporate mask and just be? Can you imagine how incredibly powerful and how incredibly high our performance would be when we're already performing our way up there?
Yeah.
So this is the message we need to get through to employers, because even if we talked about the legislation that exists, people don't want to use it because they don't want to be seen to be using like a get out of jail card, for want of it's not the best expression, but like for want of I don't know what's an American expression. I can't think of one.
Free card or.
Yeah, like, we don't want to be hanging your hat on this thing because we don't want to use that because that might make us seem different or weaker or more vulnerable than our colleagues. And we don't want to be seen different because we're women. Well, actually, we make up the majority of the population, and actually we're living in a very patriarchal world. So how can we come together and find a solution that works for all of us? So we just need these conversations. We need to start opening people's eyes, opening people's minds, and looking at creative solutions that is a win-win-win for all of us.
I agree. And when you were talking about DE&I, it just made me think about so many of the states over here in the US that are cutting out DE&I, and so many people who don't understand fully what it is. Like you mentioned, we make up majority of the population. If more women understood it and did not look at it from this lens of race, because that's where people look at it at, it encompasses so much more. But if they only understood this piece, I really do think they would fight a little bit harder to keep these laws in place. We can talk about DE&I a lot.
Sorry.
No, we can. Like, because I'm really enjoying this conversation so much. It's been really educational for me. It's been really exciting. I really could not wait to talk to you. I was like, I have to talk to her. I don't care. Move my schedule around. I got to talk to her. Sure. And so, and we'll move on because I know we can't talk forever. But I would definitely love to. How you hit on some things earlier in terms of your background, in terms of psychology, mental health. It sounds a lot like me. My background is psychology, mental health, coaching, nutrition, personal training, and also I see that you are becoming a yoga teacher. How has this all contributed to your holistic approach to menopause and overall well-being
Yeah.
with not only yourself, but maybe any of those women that you help support as well? We'll be back right after this. Hey, I know you're navigating perimenopause and menopause and you're looking for relief. Well, I have the solution. Go to myalloy.com because they offer personalized plant-based treatments. And here's the great news, honey. They're running a special right now where you get $20 off your first order using code NAVIGATE20. This is valid through October 26th of 2024. Go over there to the website, MyAlloy, that's MYALLOY.com, and enter Navigate20 at checkout so you can get that $20 off, girl. Take advantage of this now so that you can start feeling your best. And also let me know how it works for you. Would love to hear that feedback.
I think what's happened over the last 10 years, when I first left work, I retrained as a coach, a transformation coach, a life coach, a health coach, kept on doing coaching diplomas to learn more and more and more as you do. And I realized that actually just coaching someone with any of those single hats on didn't work because it was missing the lens of being menopausal. And I'd had an executive coach as a senior leader in financial services. I had an executive coach who was a psychologist, an occupational psychologist, huge brain, amazing woman. I still think she's an amazing woman. And completely missed the key questions because menopause wasn't brought into the equation. I didn't know I was menopausal and she didn't think to ask. So I think that was the thing that made me realize that as a coach, I needed to start having some sort of framework over and above just a general executive coaching or transformational or master coaching type approach. Because if someone genuinely doesn't know what they're going through as menopause and you're not asking any question that can provoke that type of conversation, you're completely missing the core, the heart of what's going on. So I started developing a framework, which is so simple. It's so simple. Anyone can use it anytime, any place, anywhere. Mindset, hydration, nutrition, movement, self-care, boundaries and responsibilities, all of these kind of core basic things. And I put it in the framework and I developed a script and then I took clients through it and I've taken thousands of people through it now and it works. It's super simple. One of my clients said to me, it is so simple, but it's really profound. And I thought that summed it up really nicely. So I now train menopause coaches. I train people to do what I do because we're going to have somewhere in the region of 1 billion people in menopause by 2030. And with the best will in the world, I'm not going to get around even 1% of them. So I need to get more and more and more people out there. So I train people now to become menopause coaches so that they can use this framework. They can learn about menopause. They can build a network of menopause experts around the world so that they can do the bit as a coach, but then have an amazing network of people to refer on to when they come up against things that are outside of their expertise, because there's only so much any one of us can do. None of us, and I don't believe anybody that says they've got all the answers to anything to do with menopause. I'm still learning and I've been studying this for 10 years and I learn every day how much I don't know by how much I learn. And I think that it's just for me now using that framework, helping people understand what the endocrinology is, what the physiology is in lay terms. We don't need to know the ins and outs of the real deep detail. But we do need to understand how estrogen, progesterone, testosterone play roles in our body and why we experience symptoms and what the impacts are on the rest of our body systems as we're going through menopause, and then potentially what the impacts might be in later life. Because the reality is, we don't know. We just don't know what the impacts are going to be with HRT, without HRT, or MHT, depending on the part of the country you're in. So what is it that's within our gift? What's within our control? What can we do to help ourselves? And how can we make sure we get the best medical support? So I now train people to go out into the world and help other people. I obviously go into organizations. That's what we've been talking about. But I want to try and get as many menopause coaches, mentors, champions out into the world so that we can stop people going through what so many of us struggle through alone, not knowing what's happening and what's going on until 2, 3, 4 or more years later, when we wake up on the other side going, really? It was just menopause and we could have done something about it.
Right.
So that's my mission, is to get as many people into the world to help others so we don't see anyone else suffering unnecessarily.
I love the mission and I love what you're doing, because we need more Laurens to speak up. We need more Laurens in the world to educate women, to educate organizations. So I really appreciate that you are, and that more women are stepping up too, because I'm seeing a lot of menopause coaches. I'm a menopause coach, and I know when I first saw it, I said, what is that? I mean, I know, about a little about menopause. I don't know everything. I do research, just like you mentioned. And of course, I know coaching because I, have a certification in it. But I was like, what is menopause coaching? And so hearing you talk, it makes me now more curious to even want to learn more about it, because we need more Laurens in the world to go around and just support women, teach women how to advocate for themselves, educate women, even educate more companies, because I know you love what you do, but you can't be like all these places at one time. Thank you for this again. I know I've been thanking you for this conversation, but thank you again for this amazing work that you're doing to bring more light to this conversation. I want to switch just a tad bit and just touch on a little bit of research before we get to the end here. In doing research, I saw this, and I also think when I was watching one of your videos, I think you mentioned this a little bit as well. But there was some research that showed that the highest rates of suicide in women are between the ages of 45 and 54, which is also when many are going through menopause. And I found that to be alarming. And
Yeah.
as someone who works in mental health every day and has an opportunity to see survey scores and things, and I never really thought, like, when I'm seeing a lot of these women going through this, could this be potentially menopause that they're experiencing? But given this alarming statistic, what mental health supports and resources do you believe are crucial for women in this age group?
Yeah, I think it's the devastating statistics. So there's two statistics. One's 45 to 49, one's 45 to 54, and they come from Samaritans, which is a charity organization over here in the UK, and also from a company called BITC, which is another charity called Business in the Community, which they did a survey back in 2014, and the Samaritans have backed that up ever since. So we know that men's suicide is much higher than women's in adults, and yet we see these spikes for women over the age of 45. So they're directly map onto the average ages of menopause. There's still work to be done to say one is directly linked to the others, because there's a lot of stuff happening at that time of life, caring responsibilities, children leaving home. We know that some people are still having younger children. I mean, I had a baby when I went through menopause. So there's a lot happening at that time of life. We're in the most senior roles. We're often living away from home. We're doing 3 times as much in our lives with half the amount of support at best than we've ever had. So we are stretched beyond stretched at this time in our life. So when it comes down to what do we need community. We need to talk to each other. We need Roni to be out there talking and provoking these conversations. We need people to be aware. We need to learn about menopause. We need to understand what we can do to help support ourselves. We need to get hydrated. We need to eat good quality protein and fat. We need to stimulate our brains to work in the best possible way that they can. But I think it comes back to community. For me, I'm very introverted. I'm very happy in my own company. Stick me in the mountains for the day. I am happy as happy can be.
Me too.
Right? But the reality is that the more time you spend alone, the more you start believing the stories that are going round in your head. And if you don't have community and you don't have people in your life that can kind of take you out of yourself and challenge your thinking, you're going to really believe those stories. And those stories can get very dark very, very quickly. You can find yourself catastrophizing situations. You can find that when your estrogen levels are dropping, your oxytocin, serotonin levels, those connection, feel good hormones that keep you balanced and connected and trusting with other people are dropping as well. And that can leave you feeling disconnected from others as well. We need to think about what the relationship with the fluctuating estrogen levels are when we go through menopause. We need to think about how we can learn about it so we know that we have to have the social interaction, whatever that means. We need to be out in nature. We need to have something that just breaks the chain of this negative story we're telling ourselves and helps us get that perspective back. For most of us, that means community. And it can be community of one. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be like, oh, going out every week with tons of people. But it just means we need at least one person that's going to check in on us, someone that's going to challenge what we're thinking. And for me, that's what it comes down to. We also know exercise is really good, being in nature, vitamin D, so many things that we cover in the Post Plan program that we teach the coaches. And it's just about helping us get out of our own way and realize that we're incredibly valuable, that we are amazing. And sometimes our hormones can play tricks on us, and we need to learn to master our hormones instead of them mastering us.
Yeah. I started a community, but I definitely want to do better at having more conversations like this and just checking in because I'm seeing women post, especially on social media, and they're like, anybody else dealing with hot flashes? And I'm thinking like, if I engage this group a little bit more, I can invite them into this space so that they can be amongst other women who can share, what they're doing to manage these things. And so you're right. As you were talking, I said, yeah, I have more work to do as well. And it was another part of the reason why I did start this podcast is because I was like, these are conversations that my mother didn't have with me and her mother didn't have with her. And we didn't really talk about it. It was almost like the silent conversation a little bit, or people were judged for changing, but people didn't know like, oh, they're going through menopause, or women not knowing what they were going through because no one was really talking about it. And so I really wanted to have this podcast so that women, we can be educated on more of the things that we're experiencing after the age of 40 plus. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for that reminder. You've done so much great work. You're continuing to train other women to go out into the world and be these amazing advocates for women in organizations. I'm just curious to know what is next as we wrap up. What's next for Lauren on this journey of educated organizations and women? What's next?
I don't know. I think at the moment, I love what I do. So every day feels like a school, it feels like fun, feels like a school day. And I was actually out for a walk with a good friend of mine a couple of nights ago, and I was talking about exactly this. I thought, okay, what's next? Well, I've done this. Now what can I do? I'm not driven by a business plan. I'm not driven by profit. I'm not driven by any of those things. I'm driven by meeting people who are aligned on my values, who are empathic, who are driven to make a difference, who genuinely want to help and support. And that's been such a blessing to be able to come out of corporate where you don't always have that luxury of choosing who you're working with. You have more or less ability to choose who you work with, but not completely, and definitely not the wider environment. So for me, it's just about how many people can I find to work with, to train, to collaborate with, like yourself, who just want to do the right thing, who just want to make a difference, who just want to help other people. And every day that I get up, I guess I'm now moving into more of a space where I want to look for more collaborations, more people who complement what I'm doing, but are aligned in values, and just see what a difference we can make together. For me, that's probably what's next.
Yeah, staying more in alignment with those values. And I love what you're doing. I'm going to keep saying that. I just I love it. And I appreciate you being here today with me to have this amazing conversation. You brought so much to my attention, and I'm sure to those who will be tuning in to listen to this episode. And there are a lot of people who are excited to hear this. Basically, like, I cannot wait for you to talk about menopause and the way that I'm gonna be breaking this down. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your invaluable insights and the transformative journey that you are on to help organization bring more awareness to these conversations, train more women to go out and support other women. And I hope that you pat yourself on the back and just give yourself some credit for doing the work. You're doing the work to help us. And I truly, truly appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners do as well. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much for creating the space to have this conversation. I'm always here to do whatever I can to help and support you and your community. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone, that is it for this episode of Navigating Life After 40. I will post all of Lauren's information so you guys can follow along her journey and all of the great work that she's doing. Follow her on all social media platforms. And also, I believe you have a Facebook group too, right? Am I correct on that?
I am. It's called the Menopause Social Hangout. And it's basically a group where we try and get educated to go and help other people, to help ourselves and help other people.
Help other people. And I will definitely post the link to that as well. Until next time, I will see you all later and have a great rest of the day. That's a wrap for this episode of Navigating Life After 40. I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did. If you love what you're hearing, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps me to reach more amazing women like yourself who are trying to navigate this amazing life. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep living your best life.